Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Laden Yurachek.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast. Today's guest is Ryan Tanaka, and he is the host of Neura Pod, which is on YouTube as well, but it's also a podcast, and it's more or less about Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, Neuralink, and it's just about this. And he's had, pretty decent success talking about this. And even though Neuralink has only had 2 announcements, he's been able to have something like 30 videos about the subject and, going into tweets and all this kind of stuff. So really interesting stuff and what it's like making media for YouTube. So I found this pretty interesting. And we talked about Neuralink a little bit as well from our uninformed points of views. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, Ryan Tanaka, pleasure to have you on the show. You are the host of Neura Pod, which is a Neuralink podcast, and it's actually on YouTube as well. And so actually we were just talking about this before the show. You have something like 20, 30 episodes out all about Neuralink and Elon Musk's Neuralink and why this will change the world, even though you're not necessarily in the neurotechnology field. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you started this broadcast.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on, Laden. So I guess one of the main reasons that I started at the beginning was I wanted to improve my communication, which is a silly reason to get started. But that was one reason that I was thinking a podcast might make sense. And then my interest for Neuralink primarily started because of working at Tesla previously, and then just getting more and more exposure to Elon Musk and some of the other projects that he's been working on. And then realizing that Neuralink is going to be a substantially larger company in the future, and this entire medical and technology space is going to continue to grow. And me realizing that and not seeing any really big podcasts that exist, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to start something. And then as far as the YouTube, I started getting into YouTube because I had asked a previous podcast host who I really respect. His name is Rob Maurer of Tesla Daily, and he recommended that I create YouTube videos to help grow the audience. And fortunately, that seems to have been the case so far.
Yeah, that's really cool. Definitely, I would say YouTube is more mainstream. If I want to show my mom how to subscribe to a podcast, it's a labor-intensive process, but with a YouTube, it's literally send a link. So I highly agree with you there that it's much more accessible. But YouTube, that's the thing. I've also done videos, and it's literally an order of magnitude more difficult to make a video because you have to think about not only the audio aspect, but also the video aspect. And you have to entertain people with the stuff on the screen, and you use more stock footage, but still, that's still not necessarily too easy. So were you nervous about that? Or do you spend a lot more time doing the actual video editing versus script writing? And yeah, I'm very curious about this.
Yeah, all good questions. Yeah, definitely at the beginning, I was pretty hesitant about it. And then Rob suggested that I just add a few photos throughout the video and then scroll through them or just slide through them extremely quickly. And I started realizing if I want to do video, I just personally have an interest in making sure that it's pretty well done. So then I started spending more time researching and watching YouTube videos to figure out how to do better editing in Adobe Premiere Pro. And then actually recently, so after about 20 or 21 episodes, I decided that it would make more sense to ask a more seasoned editor to help out. And so I've started working with an editor. His name is Andrew, and he does a really good job. He creates music and he edits videos and does a bunch of different things, but it's been great to work with him so far. And I just foresee that I personally will probably not be doing much editing in the future just because of what you were talking about. It's just incredibly time intensive for somebody that hasn't been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, I think even for people who have, it's not trivial, I guess. It's not something you can pump out in an hour. Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about this. Like why, especially so focused only on this, we look at more of the brain machine interface side of things and the research and the academic side of things. But why, especially Neuralink? And do you have enough material to talk about? You've done something like 30 episodes, right? So do you have enough material for that to cover all that they've done or will do?
Yeah, I certainly hope so in the future. I guess I would prefer that Neuralink is a little bit more public facing with the updates that they have. And I wish that they were more frequent, but I just foresee that as they make more progress in the future, the cadence of those updates will improve and increase over time. So fortunately, so far, I've felt that I've been able to produce enough content and like just enough variety that it can help continue to grow the audience. I guess what I have been trying to do recently is make sure that I at least put out one update episode every month. And so like right now, the podcast and the YouTube channel is a weekly episode, but at least one out of those 4 episodes in a month, I'll make sure that I do like a monthly update on what Neuralink has announced. And so occasionally it's an actual update from the company. And most other times it's just going over some different tweets that Elon tweeted out or Max Hodak, the president of Neuralink, tweeted out. And then I'll just analyze what they talked about and reference what they said now compared to what they said in the past and talk about what it might enable in the future. And fortunately, that's been able to provide enough content for the time being. And hopefully just with more updates in the future and a more public facing, like interesting subject, more people will be talking about it. And then there will be more content to talk about as well.
Okay. Have you thought about, or have you been able to talk to somebody from the inside, or maybe who formerly was on the inside, to get some secrets from them?
Yeah, I actually recently, I think it was a couple of days ago, 2 or 3 days ago, I talked with a former Neuralink employee. And right now, Neuralink has about 120 employees. Even if you include the people who had previously worked at Neuralink, that number is still extremely small. And just to be able to talk with him was interesting. I think most of the things that he shared were pretty much in line with what I expect. But his enthusiasm for the future of what Neuralink is creating is very similar to how I feel like they're very much in the early stages of their technology development, and it is primed for growth. Like there are plenty of competitors in the space, but with the team that they've started building so far, I have good confidence that they'll at least be one of the top players in the space for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely. They've got some really good technologies, and the difference between the first and the second announcement, basically 1 year difference, was stark. And a lot of people were just like, whoa, this is unbelievable what they were able to do in one short year. Obviously, they might have been sitting on some of that stuff the year prior too. But still, yeah, the progress is unbelievable, especially from my vantage point in academia and university side and everything. It's really cool because you might get a team of maybe half a dozen or a dozen people that are of that caliber, but then, like you said, you get 120, you get 10 times that amount in various overlapping specialties, and you can really get the whole thing moving together. And I mean, there are companies like BlackRock Microsystems that have bigger teams, not necessarily that big, but they can move that. But yeah, it's still really impressive, I think. And I still consider myself a newbie. I'm still only been doing this for 3-4 years or something like this, but it's impressive. I don't know. Yeah. What's your take on it?
Yeah, like just comparing what Neuralink's aspiring to do relative to a handful of other competitors that I've started to hear rumors about, I just feel like the overall architectural approach is more likely to bear good fruit in the future. And for example, I was recently looking into Facebook's ambitions in the entire brain-machine interface space. And I think the first mention that they had of it was at the F8 developer conference in 2017. Mark Zuckerberg talked about how a lady named Regina Dugan was going to talk about brain-machine interfaces that Facebook was working on. And one of the things that they were planning on doing was basically going through the optic nerve basically not such an invasive approach, like similar to what Neuralink would be doing. So I think because of their approach going through like your eyes, basically, they're going to be limited just physically, like the amount of information that they're going to be able to read and write to and from the brain. So with Neuralink's approach, I think the typical argument for why they're not going to be successful is that the invasive approach is not scalable. And from what I've gathered, it seems like Neuralink's going to be able to make it scalable if they have success with improving a handful of different things. So like one of the biggest challenges technically is probably just material science in general and how that applies to all the different materials that they're using. And so being able to have a robot that they created and the electrodes and the threads and every single other piece of material that's ever entering the brain, it has to be able to interact nicely with the brain material. And that's extremely difficult to do, especially when you're trying to balance dissipating heat in an appropriate manner and then making sure that you're able to deal with any shaking of the brain. So anyway, like I keep talking circles, but I think the overall takeaway that I have of looking at and listening to different Facebook things and different Neuralink advancements is just that their approach is not one that a lot of other companies are willing to take. Just be really invasive, and with the robot, they'll probably be able to do that invasive approach very scalably.
Yeah, I think so too. Here at the University of Florida, we're lucky to have some of the best deep brain stimulation surgeons here. Not every place, not every village, a city with or a town with 150,000 people has that, and we do. We're very lucky, but yeah, you got to find a way to scale that. And I think this kind of robotic way, LASIK, what was talked about in the updates was, I think that's absolutely the right way. Go to any strip mall and get that done there for a few $1,000s. And yeah, I think they might have a play actually to disrupt this deep brain stimulation or these other kind of more motory or prosthetic issues that up until now have been, relegated mostly to pharmaceuticals, but honestly that the pharmaceuticals are not very tuned for, and that they're a little bit too broad and the side effects are too high. Depression, anxiety, insomnia, like all these kind of more basic things that I guess you can have drugs for. But honestly, an implant might work really well and even better and more targeted, and you can turn on, turn off whenever you want. What do you think about that? Have you heard anything about that, or is this just the ramblings of a madman?
No, I definitely think that the overall thinking behind what Elon is aspiring to accomplish makes sense. I think it will take quite a few years to get to that point where what he's inspiring a lot of people to think about will ever come to fruition. But I guess my own personal opinion is that in the future, people will be willing to take drugs before they're willing to do like invasive implant surgery. But then after that point, there will start to be a time where people are willing to do both. And I have a feeling that they'll be able to work together, like at the same time, where you're taking some sort of prescribed medication and then also have an implant. And then in the long run, it probably just makes more sense to have only an implant connected to like different prosthetics or different types of devices that will help enable you to gain like functionality that a normal human might not ever be able to have. So I guess kind of transitioning a little bit away from like the medical applications of the diseases that Neuralink could help with, I think in the future with very high bandwidth brain machine interfaces, you'll be able to connect those implants to like a device that processes like all sorts of different wavelengths of light. And so a normal human, you're restricted to a certain range of wavelengths that you're able to see. But if you have a device that can look and see all these different wavelengths, and then you translate those to something that a normal human eyeball would be able to process, then all of a sudden you're just like seeing and hearing or smelling so many different things that a normal human would not be able to see or hear or smell.
Yeah, Geordi from Star Trek, huh? There's a lot of that kind of stuff. Like, I think Star Trek and Matrix, they're referenced a lot in these kind of talks for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
Very cool. Ryan, what is coming up for you in terms of the podcast / YouTube channel and maybe neuroscience related stuff?
Yeah. I haven't thought so substantially about these things. They often come up, but then I don't really have a good answer. I think in the future with the podcast, I'd like to see what Neuralink is doing, and hopefully in the future they'll have a better cadence of updates, and then I'll be able to discuss those and speculate even further about what future developments might be. And then one of the cool things that I've found is just that I end up getting to speak with folks like yourself who are just like more knowledgeable or more plugged into the space than I have been. And just, I think the entire community worth of knowledge is growing, and it's really cool to be a part of that. So in the future, I just foresee that community's overall knowledge base is going to continue to grow, and it will be even more fun to be part of that larger community and help grow that community.
Yeah, very cool. I think that's a great thing. You don't necessarily need to know where the staircase ends to take the first step. And hopefully you'll be able to keep up the cadence, and you'll have better contacts potentially that you can talk about rumors or whatever, but I think they have it pretty clamped down. Ryan, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Just a brief, summary of your work, and people can check out your stuff. But yeah, is there anything that you wanted to mention that we didn't talk about?
No, I think I guess one last thing that I would add is probably just to continue doing what you're doing. I think it's really cool that you've been able to speak with so many different folks in like things that are tangential topics, and then it ends up just expanding and expanding. And so I just think like anybody that's doing similar things to what you and I are doing is just really cool. And I think overall, like this space helps regular folks be inspired about the future, and it creates a future that we can all look forward to. And I think that's like such a cool thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's much more achievable than we all think, though. Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.